Hello and welcome back to the Trek Time 2024 charity show. Thank you all for coming and donating and helping out. And as you saw in the video there, we are supporting the World Central Kitchen, known for providing food to people in deprived and disaster-struck areas, in war-torn areas, with the philosophy of they need food, we get food to them now, hosted by Chef Andres. Definitely, if you haven't already, check the link below, bit.ly/TrekTime24 to come and donate on our channel. It's been an absolute blast. We've raised so far over $1,100 so far, but there is more to go. We've still got plenty of other things, including these fine people you now see before us. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome from various podcasts for our roundtable chat. We have... Oh, she's disappeared now. I was just about to announce her, but we do have... Cameron from the Greenshirt podcast and Open Pike Night. From Open Pike Night, we have Jessie as well, and very soon, in a moment when she pops back on, imagine some technical problems, Abby Sommer from the First Fight podcast, and we're just going to have a little chat. But first off, thank you guys for coming and seeing us and coming to join us for this amazing chat. And I'm loving the tie, Cameron. Oh, we can't hear you. Hang on. I haven't muted you.
Check your audio input there, Cameron.
Yeah, he knows what it is.
Now you can hear me.
There we go. Hello.
Well then, you guys never heard that I was admitting my tie is Star Wars.
Oh, you can't do that here. Whilst we're waiting for Abby, Otto, do you want to give us a little donation update? I believe we've had a couple come in.
Let me double check. I think we're all up to date.
Oh, did we go up to date? Okay, because I know we had a big one.
Yes.
Oh, okay, we're up to date. No, my apologies. Just to give away the giveaway that's running at the moment is the Jackbox Party Pack. Hit giveaway, enter, and you'll get a free code for that. We also have some other donation goals coming up as well, including spending all of Dan's dilithium, obsolete man table read, which we're very much looking forward to. And congratulations, Xenos. You also won the party pack. So give us a shout on Discord, and I will get that over to you after this stream. But Cameron, Jessie, while we're waiting for Abby, how are you, gentlemen? How are things?
They're good. They're busy. There's a lot going on.
There is. It's a lot of Star Trek stuff.
There's a lot of Star Trek right now. Oh, Jessie had my
Jessie's muted now. We can hear.
It's probably the input.
We no comprendo.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
There we go.
This stream started on technical difficulties, and it will only ever go on with technical difficulties. So.
Happy to be part of a tradition. And yeah, Cameron is kind of selling us short there. There is so much going on that it's almost difficult to do everything. But we've got new interviews with Star Trek World's crew members coming up. We have an appearance on Long Island coming up.
Oh, yes.
And giving away some passes to that. And this is actually something that I think Cameron doesn't talk about it. But he's spearheading an effort to get a statue of Commander Riker placed in Valdez, Alaska.
Oh, that's incredible.
I was really just looking up the website so I could pimp that and have Thank you, Jessie. It sounds much better coming from you. But yes, there's some movement, so hopefully it will be coming to fruition before long. We are trying to build a statue of Commander Riker in his birthplace, my birthplace of Valdez, Alaska. If you want to learn more, get on the mailing list. You can go to Riker-maneuver.com.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shocked that domain name hasn't been taken already.
That's probably why we needed the hyphen in there, but yeah.
Is he going to be posed stepping into a chair or stepping onto a
onto a bench? That's the idea. Is he will be stepping
cool.
up onto a bench that people can sit on next to him, and
with his hands sort of reaching toward the future.
You told him about the statue?
And where your hand is reaching is up to you.
Welcome, Abby. How are you? And thanks for joining us, Abby, from First Flight Podcast. How are you this fine evening, morning, afternoon, wherever it is you are?
It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon here, so I can take afternoon or evening, but
Fantastic.
I'm good. Took me a second to get my audio sorted, but I am good. Excited to be chatting with all of you gentlemen today.
Great. And thank you so much for coming. I believe, we've all kind of got a little Twitter sorority going on, or fraternity, or whatever you want to call it, going on, whereas we all sort of like share our own things and hype each other's podcasts up, don't we? So that's quite good. And I thought it would make sense to invite some of you on here today to talk about podcasts. And we obviously crush a convo in the chat as well. We'll get you on at some point as well. First question, first major question for you all, open table question. what made you decide to sit down one day and go, you know what? Like the meme of the cat sitting at the table, dressed in a suit with a newspaper, like, I should start a Star Trek podcast. Like, what first got you into that thing? Should we start with you, Abby?
Sure. Well, I listened to a lot of podcasts to start off with, and I think that's because growing up, there was always NPR in the background in my house, and then as I transitioned into adulthood and podcasting became more where I got my news, my stories, my stuff like that, I was listening to them. And so then I started talking to people about, hey, do you know what I heard on this podcast? You know what I heard on this podcast? And people started to get annoyed at me. They're like, yeah, you listen to a podcast. Maybe you should have a podcast. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Like, there's only so many things that I feel like I could talk for a long time about that anyone besides myself would want to listen. So then I started reaching out to some people who had podcasts and saying, hey, would you like this or that? And I realized Trek was really where I was going to come in on this. This was one of my areas of expertise. So I started out, and my very first time I was on Trek Ranks with Jim Morehouse over on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. And I'd been back and forthing with him on Twitter a little bit. He had me on. It was wonderful. And he set me up with my original co-host, Melanie. Like, she had been wanting to start a podcast, and he knew that I loved Enterprise. So he's hooked us up together, and she called me. And 3 hours later, we realized we had an idea for a podcast, and we started researching and kind of did it. We felt like even if nobody listened to us, it would be a way for us to get some creative output into the universe and to talk about something we were talking about anyway. And we really both were involved in the Trek community and on Twitter. And so that was really a fun thing to kind of connect even more with and start making some deeper connections with some people there. And it's kind of just grown from there. And you find your tribe. And I think I have found mine not just with Star Trek people, but with Star Trek podcasters, because we're all a bunch of people who like to talk about the thing I really like to talk about. So there we go.
Jesse, how about you?
So my podcasting journey actually started with a television show called Firefly. But it was a podcast called Sudden But Inevitable, of course, the Great Wash. And I had a friend who was really into podcasting, somebody to get in for episodes, so I ended up joining it for that. And then we started Sudden But Inevitable. And, I started listening to a lot more podcasts. I had my own. And I realized, like, I listened to a lot of Star Trek podcasts. That's kind of the thing I could talk about forever and never, ever, ever get sick of. So there was a little podcast called Greenshirt, Movies Trek Through the New Generation. And I was really enjoying it. It was one of those shows where, as you're listening, I feel like I know these people. I feel like if we're around these people, they would be my people. So I finagled my way into a guest spot. I invited them all to guest on my show. And then, basically when Strange New Worlds was ready to gear up, put in chat like, hey, what if we podcasted about a Star Trek that hadn't been off the air for 30 years? And I was like, yes, let's please do that. How can we do that? And what should we do? And Open Pike Night was born out of that. And it's been a little bit over 2 years at this point, and we are just having so much fun, which is impressive considering the show, like our show, has like 3 times the number of episodes as the actual World's TV show. But we haven't gone on hiatus yet. We've just been podcasting through the cliffhanger.
Yeah, and the amount of guests you guys have got on there, from top rank actors. Melissa Navia has been on there multiple times. Bruce Horak, you've had production designers, everyone, on there. It's quite incredible how fast you've flown from just going, hey, let's talk about the episodes, to having top billings. You've had press junkets and everything, so that's really impressive.
Yeah, 10-episode podcast that was just like a side project we were going to do and be done with.
Yep.
And now it's our baby.
No, it's brilliant.
And I gotta say, I chalk all of our success up to the fact we have the right team. Like, I run socials for us. Cameron does a lot of the emailing, press, getting interviews. That John produces the show, edits the show. So none of us feels like we have too much to make the show happen outside of real life stuff that everybody has going on. And that name, Open Pike Night, we feel like it was a good success for us. And then we started thinking, like, how do we lean into that? And let's have call-in. Let's have it be an open mic. And we invite podcasters, regular fans, anybody who wants to talk to or about Star Trek to call into the show. And I think that that's really kind of what took us to that next, right? Because not everybody has the time or money or situation available to make a podcast. But, or, maybe go to a Trek convention and stand in line for 2 hours to talk to their favorite Star Trek minutes. But everybody can make a phone call and leave a voicemail. So we figured, let's have people do that. We'll play them for the actors, the creative, all that kind of stuff. Podcasters get a little bit of extra juice out of that, we think, because you're out there. And it's kind of been like this perfect ionic storm of Star Trek goodness. And we are deeply grateful for it. And I have to say specifically, we're deeply grateful for our friend Abby here. She is one of our best callers. She's very consistent. She's always bringing good, insightful questions that the actors go, wow, that's a really good question. And it really takes a lot of pressure off of us. So thank you, Abby, very much.
Well, I love that you guys give us a chance to. No, I'm sorry, but to speak to them in our voices. I mean, you put my daughter singing Subspace Rhapsody on for 2 different sets of people, and that makes us so excited and happy, and it feels like you get a really nice moment there. So you guys have a beautiful formula, and as someone who's worked with your team, it's on both Open Pike and Greenshirt. You have a wonderful thing going there, and I couldn't echo enough how you have to have the right people to balance it out. Otherwise, your head might blow up.
100%.
Just a quick one, Jesse. Your mic's cutting out a little bit as you talk. Seems like it's just got a bit of it's the trigger off quite evenly. But while you're having a look at that, Cameron, tell us about Greenshirt. Where did that come from?
Yeah, let's go back in time. Oh, well, so my first love was and is filmmaking, but around the time I had my second child, I realized I would need to find a less time-intensive hobby, but still be able to create stuff and put things out there. And so me and some friends were talking. We're like, well, let's do a podcast. And we didn't really know what topic to do a podcast on, but we thought that would be a fun outlet for ourselves that wouldn't quite involve like being up till 3 a.m. at some weird location, wrangling food and actors. So we were thinking about it, and around that time, and I forget why, it was on Netflix at the time. I was like, oh yeah, TNG. I never did watch TNG. I guess now's the time I start watching TNG. I'm not sure exactly what that impetus was, but I started watching it, and I started posting about it on Facebook and just getting a lot of comments. Like I didn't really realize how many people in my generation grew up loving TNG until then. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the podcast. I'll just watch TNG and share my thoughts, and people can react and answer my inane questions. And interestingly, I don't think many of the people on those first Facebook threads actually became podcast listeners, but we did end up finding our audience, which included Jesse and Abby and the captain here. And yeah, and here we are halfway through season 7. I'm almost no longer a Greenshirt.
Wow. What are you going to do when it's over?
Well, we're going to do some movies. We got 4 movies, and then we got Picard. So we've got like another year of content to go if we go at the same pace.
Fantastic.
But we are also doing
Enterprise.
There's Enterprise. I mean, there's DS9 and Voyager. But I hear there's another really good Enterprise watch along podcast. So I don't really know if we could compete with that.
Oh.
So speaking of Abby, your podcast First Flight entirely devoted to Enterprise and exclusively covers sort of Enterprise and your watch along. So how did you and your co-host Chris come together to say like, hey, specifically we're going to cover Enterprise? Was it just pure that we love this show so much we can't contain all these thoughts, let's do this? So how did you come up with that?
Chris came on board for season 2. So originally, like I said, my original co-host in season 1, Melanie, she and I got connected by Jim Morehouse through the Trek podcasting community. And it really just started off as, yeah, hey, we love Enterprise, and Enterprise gets a lot of crap for not being fantastic. And I will 100% fully admit there are moments of Enterprise that are crap, but there are moments of every Star Trek series that are crap. And you know what? It's fun. And I got into Enterprise because it came on right as I was ending my college career and moving off out to like be an adult on my own, far away from everyone I knew for the first time. So it kind of felt like they were paralleling my personal journey, like going out, exploring, seeing new things, trying stuff. And it was my show. I mean, I'd been a huge Trekkie for pretty much my whole life, but Enterprise just resonated with me, I think because of where I was. And so when Melanie and I started talking and we are like, this is really great. Let's celebrate Enterprise. Let's do something really positive. Let's get out there what we love about it, why we feel good about it, and acknowledge that, yeah, it could have done better, but so could a lot of things. And hindsight is very, of the time. So we just kind of started and said, no one might listen to us, but that's okay. Got some friends, your parents to start. It started building momentum. And Chris was one of those people who started listening because he liked Enterprise and he'd found us on Twitter and he'd heard us on various other pods. And when we needed to transition because of some health issues for Melanie, he was there saying, I'll help you with editing, because that man is an editing genius. Many props to my partner, because I do all the pre-work and the scripts and he does all the post-work and the editing, and it's amazing because he drops in astounding things. So he said, I'll just come on and start editing. And then so he was doing a little bit of that, and then we just kind of started realizing Melanie needed to take a bigger step back, and he and I said, well, let's give it a shot, and we did. And it took a little bit, but I think we really found a rhythm because he hasn't been obsessed with Enterprise like I have been. And so it's been really neat to have those contrasting moments there. Like, I've seen them all dozens of times. He's seen some of them 3, maybe, and sometimes doesn't even remember. So it's a really nice balance there. And both of us come from kind of similar ages, similar parental points of view, which is kind of interesting because looking at this series as with another parent brings up some interesting issues I hadn't thought of when I had first watched it. And it's just been a blast. We're into season 3 now, full on into the Xindi arc, and it's been really fun to explore the series and find new things in something I've thought I knew everything about. So, and I got a great partner to do it with. We always laugh and we always have a good time. And even episodes I'm dreading, by the time I'm done talking about it, I feel good. And that's kind of the point.
I think it's half of it. Like, you've got to be having fun, making these. You've got to be, enjoying to do them. Otherwise, you kind of get to that point where, like, well, this isn't a hobby. It feels like a job. But yeah, it's
right.
Definitely good to do that.
So let me ask you all. Our channel ended up being kind of a COVID baby, and it's easy to do lots of different streams and shows and stuff when you're locked in your house and you can't go anywhere. But the last year especially, we've been trying to check date books and, do you have this weekend free? Do you have that weekend free? Has that been kind of a tough transition for you guys, or have you found it's been, once you get set up, you're pretty consistent?
So we've always been in at least 3 different locations. Oh, am I? I'm still learning Discord. Just so
no, it's fine.
knows.
You're there.
So we've always been in at least 3 different locations. So I'm basically Denver area, Cameron's basically Portland area, and John has been 100 different places over the course of the show. So I think we've done 1 episode where we were all in the same location at the same time, and that was in Star Trek Las Vegas. So yes, to answer your question, it can be a hassle. We're also in 3 different time zones on top of being in 3 different locations, which I'm sure you guys have noticed today specifically can, be like wrangling a herd of cats. So it's just, we have a shared calendar in Google that we put all of our interview times in, and then we have like a specific, like podcast specific Discord chat for just the 3 of us that we really use to plan, and we share a lot of Google Docs, that kind of a thing. And I mean, there have been times when, for example, I slept through an entire interview with an Australian guest because it was I didn't know what time it was in Australia, but I'd say like 99% of the time it works out really well for us. And as you were saying, like, it can start to feel like a job, but I think another thing that comes from the balance of having the right team is that it feels like something you get to do rather than something you have to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we started a few years before the pandemic, and we were always recording in person, which was always a nice reason to get together. But the pandemic did force us to start trying recording virtually like we all are now, and it kind of ended up working a lot better. It's less of a time commitment. It's easier on the editing end. It is so nice to just have isolated audio tracks. Oh my goodness! Like,
Yeah.
you will notice a difference from, like, I think it was right around the beginning of season 3 we shifted to that. So yeah, timing is always a challenge. We've got 4 hosts and then sometimes a guest or two, and that can be struggle to balance. But we've made it work. Except there's the odd one out where suddenly people start dropping. It's always frustrating when you like, oh, you can't make that day. Okay, well we'll shift this so you can make that day. Then someone else can't make that day, and then someone ends up losing. But that's only happened once or twice. For the most part, I don't know. I think like what Jesse was saying, it's a testament to people wanting to be there.
So
I think it's a little easier. Oh, go ahead.
please.
I was just going to say, I think it's a little easier on my end because there's only 2 of us, which makes it a lot more. We can just text each other and be like, oh my God, my kid puked. Never mind about tonight. And then you keep going. But I think it is a challenge, but it's also something that, like I said, it's worth it. And it's me time. So I try to make sure that I'm prioritizing that. And I know anybody else who podcasts with families, kids in the background are loud. And that's hard when you are recording audio. And a lot of times we're recording after kids go to bed in whatever time zone is later, because that's how it goes. Or somebody's in a hotel overnight on professional development and we're like, all right, can this sound good there? But you make it work and it's fun. And like I said, I make it a priority for it to be time where I am just a grown up. And that's been really important for me to have. So I think that's one of those things that I'm trying to balance and show my kids and show people out there, you can do this. You just make it a priority for yourself. And that's a self-care thing. So podcasting as self-care is a real thing. Even if no one listens to you, it feels good to talk.
Amen. So, Abby, you talked about Enterprise being your show. And I found a lot with New Trek, people come in, they find the channel, and they all have their favorites when they show up. And New Trek gets a fair bit of vitriol from the old timers who love their 90s era Star Trek, and this is the real Star Trek and all that. How do you guys handle that, trying to include people, welcome them into your podcast? Or maybe if you only focus on one flavor, how do you try to make that the best flavor you can and still attract a wide audience?
Well, it helps to have friends that boost you, like all of this kind of stuff we were just saying. You find the people and they'll be like, hey, this is actually worth it. Or I don't even watch Enterprise, but it's fun to listen to them talk about it because they're interesting people. So that helps. But I think there are always issues, challenges. There have been positive and challenging interactions with people who are listeners. And I think what I always try to do is realize that, everybody's favorite Star Trek is somebody else's least favorite Star Trek, and everybody's least favorite Star Trek is somebody else's favorite. So somewhere out there, you're going to find the entire spectrum, no matter what you're talking about. And it's okay if not everybody likes your flavor. And the people who are meant to be your listeners and be your, like I keep saying, your tribe, your community, your group of people, they'll find you and they'll stay. And the rest of them, while it might be unpleasant short term, most negative people, if you just come back at them with positivity and inclusivity and not engaging the bots, but saying, hey, well, we love discussion and let's do that. And you keep it polite and kind. They don't have enough energy and there's not enough time in the day. So they just kind of fizzle out and you're stuck with the people who are really there and having a good time with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we focus mostly on TNG, so we don't see too much. But when editing, I mean, I'll sometimes, I'll shave off, I'll rub out some extreme opinions here or there. Like, it's not that I don't think of the audience at all, but for the most part, we want to be ourselves, and we don't want to try to change our opinions or what we say based on a hypothetical listener. And then on Twitter, on the social media, it's a lot like Abby was saying. Like, I don't engage. Like, the few kind of negative comments or trolls that have come through, you just don't engage, and they get bored and go away. And I think if you put out just like kind of a laissez-faire positivity, like that's what you're going to end up getting back. Jesse will have some interesting comments because I think he takes a little bit of different tact. And there's been many times where I'm like, Jesse, what are you doing? And then it just like reaps benefits. So I'll let him go.
So I'm sure what Cameron is referring to, as you mentioned, a lot of the new Trek does get some of the troll behavior. A lot of it is just people who genuinely love old Trek and, want things to all be that. And I mean, obviously not everything can be TNG. Not everything can be Deep Space Nine. And I try to be a fan of all Trek, right? So I want all of the Trek. I listen to shows that cover all of it. I watch all of them. And just really quickly to that point, except I have not seen all of Enterprise, and that's how you know Abby's show is good, because I'll listen to that show even though Enterprise is not my favorite. Now, what Cameron is referring to is sometimes I just cannot help myself, and I will push back on trolls, get really snarky with people, tell them like, oh yeah, because TNG is perfect. It doesn't have any terrible episodes like Code of Honor, right? Like, and what we've found from that 99% of the time is that the people that love what we're talking about actually just rally around that conversation and just start hammering that troll and being like, look, if you don't have anything positive to say, then get out of here. Actually, part of how we got in touch with Melissa Navia, we had somebody saying, I can't watch Strange New Worlds because Ortegas's haircut is just, a certain way. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a haircut. And went back and forth with this person forever, and eventually they went included Melissa Navia in the reply and was like, look, I just think it's a lesbian haircut and I don't associate with those people. And it's like, okay, well, now everybody who's been watching me pester you and fight with you is going to pick a side. And the people that picked the Star Trek side of that, the infinite diversity and infinite combination side of that, have stuck around and become fans and listeners, and they really care because that's kind of the message of Star Trek. And to Abby's point, people that have something negative to say about the show, at least from our end, they're not going to take the time to script out a 90-second call, find where to send it, get it into us. And, it's not like we'd play it anyway. Or if we did, I'd just sit and make fun of it. But point being, the people that love what you're doing and that love Star Trek are much more willing to put out effort. I mean, have you guys have seen Star Trek cosplay? Like, effort is not a problem for fans, but it is for trolls.
A quick cut in. A couple more donations have come in. One from Cranky, who says, "Great quiz, and I didn't lose this time. Cheers, folks." Thanks, Cranky. Thank you for Davey for coming on for the quiz, and thank you for our largest donation of the day, $200 from Davey from the Trexperts quiz.
Wow,
He saw how bad we were at trivia, knew we needed help, and gave a big donation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Davey. Abby, here we go.
Oh, I was just going to say that if you don't listen to Davey, you should, because if you want to talk about listening to people you feel you know and laughing along, that's the show to listen to. I love that show.
I tell you what, Davey, $200 has definitely earned you one more plug for your channel and chat. So there you go.
I like quizzes, go and watch it. It's so good. There is a lot of really good, diverse Star Trek content out there from fans and things like that, which is why, I love listening to Greenshirt, because it's your new perspective. I love hearing people that watch things for the first time. You kind of go what are they going to make of this episode for the first time? And you get a lot of the call-ins for the open Pike, and here there are in Davey's Trexpert quiz, you get everyone does a little bit of something different in different spaces, and there's kind of room for them all, including, I'm going to shout out Crusher Convo for their probably slightly unhealthy obsession to Beverly Crusher, but it is entertaining. Absolutely fantastic. So how would you balance, because we're all fans of Star Trek here, how do you kind of balance being talking about Star Trek from a fan's perspective, but trying to do it as a critic or an analyst? So, if you're reviewing an episode or you're talking about an episode, do you have that little line where you go, well, this is my just needlessly excited, I'm going to review this episode 10 out of 10 because just it had this person in it? Or do you kind of, how do you sort of, how do you change the line? Your favorite Enterprise episode might be like a 4 or 10, for example, but you love it so dearly because, gosh, doesn't Porthos eat that cheese so cutely? So how do you kind of balance between sort of being a fan and a critic, essentially?
Oh, Porthos does love his cheese, so that was a lovely point there. This is really interesting.
My cat just jumped on the piano. Second time.
Very dramatic.
I've always wanted to have a personalized soundtrack, so thank you. I was just talking to my parents about this because in high school, I took a bunch of these international classes that were good to get you college credit and get you ready to analyze literature texts and high level chemistry and all this. And I was like, you know what? I never really used a lot of that. And then I go, wait a minute, do you know what I'm using all of these years I spent talking about analyzing like literature and poetry and all that? Oh, it's on my Star Trek podcast. Like I think back to those days of like, what are main themes and how are we seeing character growth and story elements and all that. All that was drilled into me is now actually coming to how I look at the episodes. And it's interesting because I'm not looking with a fresh perspective. I am looking at it as a fan's perspective. And I really enjoy when I prep for my podcast, I usually watch every episode 4 times because I'm crazy and don't sleep well. But well, but I have a whole system. And after, 2+ seasons, I've realized I watch it the first time just as me, just fun, enjoying it or not, doing whatever, just taking it in. The second time I go through and I take a bunch of notes and I look at things that have popped out, things that I want to remember, things that I made sure that I'm looking back at and watching the second time around, the third time around. The third time I watched the stuff that isn't important. Like I watched the backgrounds, I watched the food, I watched the costumes, I watched the lighting, I listened for music cues because some of that is my favorite, all the minutia, all the little stuff, right? And the amount of joy you can find in tiny little things like that is really fun for me. I know for some people it would drive them nuts, but I think it's delightful. And so then the fourth time I kind of go through and synthesize. And then I do go through and I say, okay, I'm looking for the things that if somebody wasn't me who already loved this, what would you notice or what would I want you to notice? If I was trying to convince you to watch with me or why I have this opinion of how it went or that opinion, what I feel about this ethical dilemma, I go through and do all of that. And then when I actually get on and start talking about it, I've got this is the real stuff I want to talk about. And then we get off on tangents and have fun and make personal connections. But that's part of what makes podcasting fun is hearing the journeys and the thoughts and the connections that other people are making. The fact that it seeps into your life in other ways or it brings back memories. And that's the fun part for me. That's where I like to bring the fandom part of me in going, oh, when I was a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with Aquiel's arm bracelets in that last scene with Jordy because they wrapped around. You see, you're all laughing because
Yes.
right? Exactly. I thought those were the coolest things. If I could have worn those to prom, I probably would have. It's that kind of stuff that makes it feel really fun. It doesn't make it feel like you're reading a paper. And so I try to make it a balance of this really moved me. This really is why this is important to me. And then here's the fun stuff as well. And that's what I really enjoy about podcasting because I get to make that balance. And I do think about it, but it kind of at this point, again, with the right person, the right team, it flows. It feels like you're just having a really good conversation. And that helps make that easier.
Chet asks you, Abby, do you watch 4 times in a row or do you take breaks in between?
I usually do about a week before. I like to have at least a sleep between each one. So, because sometimes I find that after a day or two of thinking about something, I think about it differently. Let me tell you, if anybody wants to have a really sleepless week, start watching Cogenitor repeatedly and start thinking about all of the levels of issues and of morality and everything in that one. That was a hard week. But I feel like it makes it a better experience overall when I get to sit with it like that.
Hearing this dedication, I'm now realizing why you're one of my favorite podcasters, Abby.
Oh, that makes my heart full. Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
That makes sense. That's why she's always got something so smart and to say. Like, oh, she puts in the effort, and I appreciate that.
It's more than we do. We turn up and go, what episode are we watching? Oh, right, okay. And then just goof over it for like 40 minutes.
But that's fun too, and that's what makes this kind of space fun. You feel like you're just hanging out with people that you'd want to hang out with.
Well, yeah, some people want mint chip, some people want peach, some people want pistachio, and you have to serve everyone out there something different or it's going to get stale. I want to ask each of the three of you, so we've just we're maybe on the downswing, the twilight of the second golden era. A lot of shows going on, a lot of movies. Presumably, we'll hit another era coming up pretty soon. They're talking about the Section 31 movie and the Academy TV series. If there's one thing, one concept, one idea, or just something you really like in your shows and your sci-fi that you'd like to see a new show or a new movie center around, is there something really that you feel like all the series to date haven't quite scratched that itch for you? Jesse, let's start with you.
I think that a lot of folks really want a Star Trek story told in the Star Trek universe from a non-Federation standpoint. I mean, you pick a faction, right? Romulans, Klingons, whatever it might be. Maybe like an anthology series with the Q or something. But even, shows that are traditionally looked at as, this is the one where it critiques the Federation. For example, DS9, right? There's a lot of examining of the Federation viewpoint. It's still a Starfleet story. And Prodigy, which I love and can't wait for season 2 of, is still a Starfleet story, and that's what we love about it, right? It takes a minute to get there, but it's still about Starfleet. So I would be really interested in that, and the Nicholas Meyer Khan SETI Alpha 5 TV show that got turned into a podcast that we've then never heard anything else about. Like, I'm totally ready for that. Please give me more Star Trek audio dramas and give me those kinds of perspectives. I think the thing that's really cool about Star Trek is it does always show you, just because these people have different opinions doesn't mean one of them is wrong. It just means they're justified for different reasons. And I think there's a deep, deep mine to dig into there for ideas. So, not to contradict myself, but I would like an Ortega spinoff about racing through space, and I don't care what the setting is.
Mario Kart style. I am still all
Yes.
about a Mario Kart style pilots from all the different series. It could be a short trek, a long trek. It would be awesome.
Actually, Mad Max would work
Holodeck
quite well.
Adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, see?
Absolutely it would. And, I know that as a Star Trek podcaster, you're not supposed to mention that other Star franchise, but
Stargate,
what that other Star franchise did with Visions, I think was amazing. Go full anime, give it to different studios, make anthology stories. Like, give me a series of Star Trek stories just like that. I think it would be a great way to infuse the franchise with new creative blood, and it would give us potential leaping off points for series in the future. And, maybe Paramount's not involved in that future. We don't know. But whoever does end up as the steward of this franchise, they need to understand there is no shortage of Star Trek stories, even 900 episodes later.
Yeah. We've spent so much time in this universe, but like a what if Visions kind of thing would be amazing. Like, there's a series of books out there called the Myriad Universe where they do exactly that. They do like a what if on various scenarios, and they're great reads. But yeah, I'd love to see something like a good excuse to get some old actors back. Exactly. How about you, Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always said I wanted a Starfleet Academy series, and now that's coming. So I don't know what my answer is. I guess, what I've always come to Star Trek for mostly, what really draws me to it is that kind of exploration, that like, what else is out there? Let's go these wild adventures, almost Indiana Jones but in space types of adventures. And all the series have kind of flirted with it, but that's never really been what Star Trek's about. Star Trek is like a highbrow sci-fi show where it's all allegories, which is great. But I want to ship Lost. I'm excited to get to Voyager because the premise is exactly what I want, but I have a feeling it's not really going to deliver on that. So that's what I want a ship to go out there, find some like weird, hardcore H.P. Lovecraft type horrors and have to deal with it. I'll take that. I want the horror Star Trek. That'll be my answer.
It has some horror.
I think the
Voyager
closest
has some horror episodes, doesn't it?
No, not
Absolutely.
horrible horror.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
There's a difference. I do love Voyager's probably my favorite, so you will absolutely find stuff that you'll love in there. But I think the closest we got to Indiana Jones would be the laser whips from the Ferengis in TNGs. So I'm not sure that qualifies though.
Hey, in Disco this week, they literally picked up a crystal and smashed it to get a clue. Like, that's pretty Indiana Jones right there.
This whole season.
Stamp something though.
Yeah.
Ooh, if I could do a series, can I throw mine in? It's real easy. Temporal Cold War. I want resolution of the temporal Cold War, or not even resolution. I want us to explore it more. I want there to be more out there. I want there to be more connections. Perhaps the thing with Giorgio and the Section 31 movie is going to be some of this. I mean, she walked through Carl / the Guardian. I personally have a theory that if you look really closely when we were doing Face the Strange in Discovery, when Rayner puts the little thing on the time bug, if you freeze frame it, I think it looks like the Guardian of Forever. And I think there's a connection there because the Guardian talked about being weaponized. But time travel is my jam. Like, I love time travel episodes. I love ideas of people coming back and trying to mess with stuff and all the issues it causes and fixing it and meeting yourself and all that. I love time travel. So please bring it on. And, after 30 years, I'd be happy to find out who Future Guy was. Like, that would just make me really happy. I'd feel like I could check a box off my life list.
Who do
I was just
you
talking
think it
last
is?
night about how
Sorry.
I
Kevin.
don't even know anymore. It's probably somebody that we don't even know at this point. I would love that if it was Kovic or Mira Giorgio, like with a filter on. I think that would be amazing. But I don't think that's who it is. I think if they actually did this story, it would end up being somebody completely new or some random tiny little background, somebody who didn't have a big part and nobody would think of. So as long as it's a good story, I don't really care. I want it to be a good story that explores a lot of those layers, and then that can just be the icing on the cake.
Can we connect Star Trek to Twin Peaks and say it was Dale Cooper?
Absolutely.
Get Carl McLaren in somehow.
I say Gary 7.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So Dan, I want to ask you, I know you're not one of the licensed paid professional guests that we have today, but you've talked a lot about the hope and optimism of Star Trek and coming together to solve a common goal. And your comments in our reviews have actually made me think about things quite often. So if we're going forward to a new series, is there anything like that needs to be checked off your list in terms of optimism and a bright future?
Yeah, I need my content to be uplifting. That's one of the main reasons why so growing up, I was catching the tail end of Battlestar Galactica. I'm dating myself here, but there was there was a lot of content that just seemed a little bit dramatic or dystopian, and I never got that impression from Next Generation. That's what really drew me into Star Trek initially. And then I got to revisit in syndication some of the original series and just seeing the camaraderie and the brothers in arms, and I felt like telling the stories of humanity overcoming and triumphing really just gave me hope, and it was my guiding light, and it's guided my interactions with other people. It's drawn us all together. I'm really appreciative for the people I have in front of me that you're in my life now. This is fantastic, and so any series has to make sure that they keep that core concept. And while I understand that it's exciting to get some action and some drama here and there, it's a mistake to lose sight of those interactions. I love Star Trek dearly. I don't love all Star Trek dearly, and that's okay too. As we've said, we all have our own shows that really draw us to them, our shows, and I think that's what we bring to the table as content creators, just being able to share that love in some way through the video and through the audio, and really connect with people. And that's what I'm always looking at from the TV screen, is to take those performances and bring them into myself and take the best parts of it along with me as I go out into life.
Well said. Question for the Open Pike Nights, Jesse and Cameron. Who has been your favorite and most memorable guest so far? And you cannot say Melissa Navia, because that feels like that's a cheat for the both of you. But who has been your favorite guest star that's come on? The best person to talk to, or the one you enjoyed the most? I know you don't want to pick favorites, but which one sort of stood out for you and went,
which one did you like least? Call them out by name. We don't need to know.
Let's get some negativity going. Come on.
Yeah. You know who was the absolute worst? I'm totally kidding. Cameron, do you want to go first for this one?
Not really, but I can. I'm trying to think of our.
Well, I'll tell you my two favorite episodes for you guys. You think for a minute. My two favorites were listening to you guys after Vegas was the most beautiful, heartwarming thing to hear the three of you geeking out about how you geeked out. And my favorite interview of you, which is no surprise, is when you got Bernadette Croft and you talked costumes, which just makes my heart sing. And she was so delightful to listen to. I could only imagine talking to her was even better. So
the great thing about Bernadette, and she kind of feels like a cheat too, is she's the one who came on who kind of felt like the biggest fan of us. Like, she had actually listened to it and like
that's cool.
talking
That must have
about
felt
us
good.
with people on set. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing. Like, oh, the people who make the show that we talk about listen to us talk about it, and like, yeah, it's that weird I'm sure misuse the term Mobius loop, but I'm going to use it because it sounds sci-fi and Star Trek-y. But yeah, just it's nice, and yeah, she was amazing. I always just kind of fall back on, actually, I think, it was early into our interviews, so, we were still kind of learning what to expect. And we'd gotten Rong Fu on, who plays Lieutenant Jenna Mitchell, I think. And yeah, I mean, she was a smaller role, so we're like, okay, yeah, we'll get her on, and she'll have some stuff to say, but maybe not be have as much story to tell as everyone else. And she was just such a delight, and I think it was like the first kind of inkling that everyone involved with the show is just an amazing person, that they really do just draw like the best people to the show, that even these smaller roles get filled with like people whose stories and personalities can easily fill an hour and a half, 2 hour interview. And so yeah, I like to go back on that one, just like that's when I realized, like, oh, Strange New Worlds is something special, and our show might end up being something special too.
And we're never gonna lack for interesting conversation. It is really difficult to pick. I had a ton of fun with Kay Hanley and Tom Polche, who wrote all of the songs for the musical. My favorite part was telling them, like, I told my wife that we were talking to you, and she went, "Shut up." And I was like, "Do you know who those people are?" And she went, "That's Letters to Cleo. Are you kidding me?" And I was like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, "Oh my God, have you never seen 10 Things I Hate About You?" And so it was like Abby was mentioning, it's like sometimes you find these connections to your real life that you didn't even know were there. And that was a ton of fun because you could really see them thinking back to their time writing it and remembering not just the process, but the emotions, right? So they were getting to the point where they were like, "Oh yeah, I remember hating you by the time we were done with that song because you would not let up on this one lyric." Or I remember just having no energy left because we'd just done a tour, that kind of a thing. But I don't know. I've had so much fun with all of our guests. Earlier we were talking about balancing being a fan and being a critic. I don't do that personally. I just am a fan. And I get to do that because Cameron and John, I think, would proudly describe themselves as film nerds. So they're looking at a lot more of the process and like the pieces that go into it. So I don't really need to think about that. I have learned to as the shows have gone on.
Red alarm.
But
Thank you on the rock for following. That wasn't a shut up alarm. That was just our usual notification. Don't worry.
No, totally good. But it has allowed me, I think, some space to offer just that pure fanatic energy to some of our guests. And, sometimes I expect people to be like, "Okay, wow, this guy is a little intense," but I've never gotten that. I've always just gotten appreciation. And specifically, Dan Janot, who plays Sam Kirk, like one of the most down-to-earth, totally normal, super sweet people you could ever meet in your entire life. Like, we have since watched some of his Christmas Hallmark movies just because we found out he was in them. And it's like, oh no, I like these movies because Dan Janot is in them. Like, I can totally do it. And then, of course, Bruce Horak, who played Hemmer and Garkog. I mean, I don't know if there's a person that feels more appreciative for everything that they have in their life, because he just came on and talked about, getting to do audiobooks for the first time very recently and getting to do stage plays with people that just understand his kind of weird, as he described it. And it's like, Cameron was totally right. Like, Strange New Worlds feels special to begin with, but then to find out that all the people involved with it care about it so much. I mean, Davey Perez, who wrote some of the scarier episodes, he came and watched Star Trek 6 with us, the whole movie, and just talked about how much he loved it and how it inspired some of his episodes. And it's like, man, as a fan, Open Pike Night has been a huge gift, and I hope that that's part of what some of our callers get out of it, is just the gift part of it. I don't think I can pick a favorite, Idol. I'm sorry. I don't think I can do it.
That's fine.
Before we go too far, I want to shout out a few more donations. One from Jesse, aka Crusher Convo, who I saw in YouTube chat earlier, and Michelle P, who says, "Great cause. Thanks for doing the marathon." Thank you, Michelle, for donating.
No, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So here's a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. What kind of advice would you give to anyone that wants to start their own, not specifically Star Trek, but maybe lean that way, their own podcast? What kind of things have you learned over the years you've been doing this that you'd say, oh yeah, don't do this, or what kind of advice could you impart to someone that's saying like, hey, is sitting in front of the table going, I should start my own Star Trek podcast?
Be patient. Give it time to find itself. Find an audience. I mean, you're going to put out a lot of episodes that not many people are going to listen to for a while. So make sure it's something you're having fun with, because you're going to be doing it for yourself for a while at least. And then I will always get up on my list and say, don't be afraid to edit. I mean, maybe it's just my own personal opinion, but I feel like a podcast is not just turning on a microphone and recording you chatting with your friends. If I want to listen to my friends chat, I can go listen to them chat. A podcast is a product, and you want to put together like the ideal version of a Star Trek conversation or what other conversation. That kind of goes back to balancing the fan and the critic. Is we'll talk, and then I'll go in and I'll be like, you know what? I think we've been talking about the science of replicators a little too long here. Let's cut a minute off of that, or So yeah, don't be afraid to get in and have fun with the edit. Have fun with the edit. It doesn't have to be terrible. It's really fun being able to make yourself sound better. Like, who doesn't want to do that?
And to that point specifically, your topic is what will get people to check you out, right? If somebody likes Strange New Worlds, for example, they might check out Open Pike Night. But if they hate us three hosts, they're not going to keep listening anyway. So take that to heart in a way that isn't like, oh, I have to be a version of myself, right? Lean into what it is about yourself that you think lends itself to that fandom. Like, for me, it's that all Star Trek makes me very excited. Yes, there are things I have nitpicks with, but I'm always happy to be watching Star Trek and receiving it. For Cameron and John, they are much more adept at picking out like, oh, here's how I think they shot that, or here's, the production process that I'm nearly certain went into that. And they're able to lean into that in a way that I think balances the show, like you were saying, critic and fan. And so just remember, they will show up for your topic. They will stay for the hosts. And I think that also goes into editing. Like, yeah, even if they like you, they don't want to hear you saying, wait, what was that thing? Here, let me look it up. Okay. Oh, okay. The internet says this thing is that. Absolutely do that, but edit that chunk out. Like, just
don't be afraid to make yourself sound much smarter than you are.
Yeah. Listen to any professional interview on NPR or the news or, anything like that, and think about all the stuff you don't hear. You can tell when cuts are happening, and guess what? It doesn't affect your enjoyment because it's being put together, as Cameron said, like a product. And
it's
I
like
think
jazz. It's all about the opinions you can't hear. Yeah.
Right. And I think for me, the biggest thing I would say is the first thing I mentioned: find the right people. If it's just you, that's absolutely fine and it will work, but take your time and build up like 5-10 episodes before you even start releasing, because you will end up behind. That's just all there is to it. But if you can find a group of like-minded individuals that you get along with and that you have some shared strengths and some diversified strengths with, I think that's your best bet. Because I was like, you guys, I can edit, but I don't really love editing. I love hearing a final product and knowing I had a part in making that, but the actual process of editing is not something that brings me a ton of joy. But then the first time I met John and Cameron in person, it was like, oh, I feel like I've known these guys forever. Like, we just click, and there's no like weird, awkward, oh, hi, I'm Jesse. It's just like, I'm going to hug these two guys, and then we're going to go spend all weekend together. And yes, we did end up in a hot tub.
I think the only thing I'd really add there is make sure you're ready. Like, if you don't feel ready and you're jumping on mic, you're going to waste a lot of time. And the humming and the hawing and give yourself some grace. Somebody told me 10. The first 10 episodes you put out are going to be twice as much work and take twice as much time before and after, and you're going to hear them back and think of all the things you should have done, and that's okay, because you'll find your groove and you'll get to it. And I want to echo the try to work ahead if you can, thing because life happens, and life happens when you don't expect it, and so do blizzards and storms and injuries and COVID and whatever. So if you give yourself that cushion, you forgive yourself later on when you have to take it because of whatever that it is. And I think thankfully the three of us are on a podcast where we can kind of do that. But you do get to the point once you have an audience, you feel like I don't want to disappoint them, like if we have to take a week off or a break or whatever. But all I ever hear, like if we say, oh, you know what, it's the week between Christmas and New Year's and life got to us and sorry, everybody's fine with that. This is your fun. And that's really what it all comes down to. If you want to start a podcast, this should be your fun. Yes, there's going to be some days where you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. But if it isn't fun most of the time, then it's not worth it. And if you find it fun, then you're doing the right thing. And this is your creative output. And yes, again, find your people that work with you, and it becomes joyous.
Yeah, I think it's good because we have a similar kind of thing. I think it's like Sunday nights. We'll go like, we're going to watch some Star Trek tonight for our reviews. And it's like, I love this. I love sitting down and watching Star Trek with these people because it's, with the Auto and Dan and Stars and everyone, because like it's such a joy. We barely watch the episode. We just riff about everything that's going on in it, but it's so much. It's a joyous moment, and I think it's things like that. The moment you look forward to on the calendar, go like, I know this is gonna be great. We're gonna have a good time. And
that's not entirely fair, because there are episodes where that's sort of our rule of thumb is the less we talk during the episode, the more we're enjoying it, because you really get sucked in. But there's also, just your points. There are different ways that you can produce a podcast, or we do live streams, and it's all a little bit different flavor, because like Dan and I, when we do audio only stuff, I might be done editing. I'm like, wow, that was 324 cuts for 1 hour of content. And that's a lot, but it's a lot easier to tighten that up than it is something like a live stream where you have, video in the mix or people adjusting their mics or whatnot. So, if you're new and starting out, and no one asked my opinion, but I'm going to give it anyway, because we're podcasters, try all the different flavors, and you may like one more than the other.
That's a really, really good point.
Podcasting on audio has, I think, made me a better speaker, because there's no pain like having to edit out 1 to 200 of your own ums.
Or the 15 times you say absolutely in response to somebody. That's mine.
That's literally one of my objectives for starting a podcast. It's like, I bet after 100 episodes, I'll be a better speaker. I don't know if it has, but I'll play it it has.
Mine is I say 15 times in one sentence, and I don't know that until I've heard that episode, and I go, wow, I sound like a Valley Girl.
We half shamed one of our colleagues because he kept saying, as a matter of fact, as a matter of fact, Oh no, the fact of the matter is. The fact of the matter is. He said it so much. I actually, in 4 episodes, I managed to come up with a 2-minute compilation of every time he said a matter of fact. He never said it after that. Slightly cruel, but he's still with us now, so that's fine.
Okay.
Abby, Jesse, Cameron, thank you so much for coming and doing with this. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all. Before you leave us, I'd like to ask you all one last question. What is your ultimate dream, your goal, the thing you'd like to see most in regards to your podcasts or in Star Trek in general? What do you want to see most happen? Where do you want Open Pike Night to go? Where do you want First Flight to happen? Or what would you like to see on them? Where would you like to... I see Jesse's consulting his local deity, so we'll go with you, Abby, first.
See, I thought you had door prizes for me. You're just going to keep asking questions. That's not very nice.
Where do I...
Greatest dreams to everyone live. Oh, that's all.
My greatest dream for Star Trek probably is that it keeps going for as long as it has been, or even longer again. Let's make this something that keeps living, that is breathing, that is growing with us, that is continuing to challenge us, that is a place to go and think about moral questions and reflect on not just when the time that it was made, but what it tells us about us now, and if we're still saying the same story, and what that means if we are. And I share Trek with my kids, and I want that to be something that I can continue doing into the next bunch of decades, because it has been absolutely glorious for me. And as far as my podcast, I mean, we have a limited run as well. We're partway through season 3. So, 2 years from now, I am hoping that I have a brilliant idea and I'm ready for the next thing. And that First Flight lives on as a positive bite of Enterprise love, and that tells you that it is a rewatchable listen and a rewatchable watch, because Enterprise needs more love.
If we're dreaming, I'll say for Star Trek, I'd love to see another Kelvinverse cast movie. Let's just throw that out there. And while we're dreaming for the podcast, I want a set visit. I want to sit in the captain's chair.
Oh.
I put it out there. Putting those vibes out.
I'm not going to disagree with Cameron, and I promise I do have an answer for this, but I got to say I already feel incredibly humbled by some of the stuff that doing this show has given us. The first thing was like, oh, we're talking to Melissa Navia. She flies the Enterprise. Like, how do you go up from there, right? And then we just kept getting guests. And a big part of that was thanks to her. We were like, so how did we do? Is this how you normally get an interview? Who should we contact? And she really helped us out and blew the door open for us. And since then, I mean, I've stood in front of or spoken to every cast member of Strange New Worlds main bridge crew, and I'm like, I don't know what I could ask for beyond that, right? Like, as a Star Trek fan, you're like, that's all of it. I shouldn't ask for more. But then we started getting the screeners, and it was like, oh wow, this is a huge responsibility because I have a tendency to gush, as you may have noticed, and now I can't gush about this thing that I just watched. So I'm really grateful to have Cameron and John that I can talk to about things like that. And Cameron is right. We would love to get a set visit, but if we're gonna dream and we're really gonna reach, nothing against Will Wheaton, but I'd like his job.
Oh.
There we go.
Red
Yeah,
alert.
ready room.
I think I could do that.
That's incredible. Okay, where
That's
can
a
we find
good
you
dream.
all? Where can we find your various podcasts and streams? Abby,
Uh,
where's First
links in
Flight at?
chat, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Like I said, my podcast is called First Flight Pod, and we're on all of the major platforms. You can also find us on YouTube under the Tricorder Transmissions Network. That's our bigger hub. And you can find us on all of the socials. We try to keep them up and monitored, some more than others, but we give it our very best shot. It's the end of the school year. We're both teachers and parents, so, we try. And if you want to find me personally, I'm on all the socials at Abby M. Summer. That's SOMMER.
Fantastic. Jesse?
So you can find Open Pike Night at openpike.com. You can find links there to merchandise, episodes, easy ways to call into the show. We also have a
About this
newsletter
long,
linked
this
there,
thick.
and that will tell you who's coming on the show next and who you can get, ready to speak to. Spoiler alert, this is something that not anybody knows yet, but we got the casting directors coming up. So
Oh,
we'll get to
nice.
talk to the people who picked the people for Strange New Worlds. So
So cool.
definitely go to openpike.com and get your questions in for them, because this is going to be a ton of fun. And we are on all the socials at openpike.
Fantastic.
Having talked to them on the phone, I can tell you it's going to be an amazing conversation. At Greenshirt87, we'll find us on Twitter is where we're most active, though you'll find us on all the socials too. And if you start talking to us there, we'll come talk to you. Find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Greenshirt, a newbie's trek through the next generation. And a reminder that if you're interested in that Riker statue I'm looking to erect, you can go to riker-maneuver.com.
Fantastic.
That's going up in Canada, right? My grandfather's Canadian. Sorry,
This is why you're my kind
No.
of people.
That's the funniest part about that is because Cameron is a TNG newbie. He doesn't have the context for that
Oh,
joke.
okay. All right.
I think I've heard
Soon.
to that. So
Yes, very soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming and joining us and helping us support the World Central Kitchen.